Hey, you guys, we're on the road. I'm attempting to speak to a difficult topic, and this is video number 5. It's either going to happen or it's not. I'm going to try to keep it really simple. So, I'm preparing for Grace Walker. The fourth in the series is 2 Sundays from now, the 14th of August. Pilgrim, unburdening the call to the sacred path. Right? This has been an unburdening series: sexuality, anger, power. Now we're looking at the call to the sacred, which seems like it's what a beautiful thing. Anybody who's actually walked it understands that it is often a hard, holy road, and understands that it's just as everything else that we've been unburdening, it's manipulated. There's power in it. So there's manipulation, there's contortion, there are burdens that have been laid on the call to the sacred that make it more difficult than it even already is. I mean, you're going to burn. If you're called and you follow the call, you're going to burn. That's just the way that it goes because you're going to be tempered, right? There's going to be so much that's going to happen, and a lot of it is going to be beauty. But we want to unburden that so that whatever happens on the sacred path, we are aware, and not just aware, but we can feel that we are companioned and we are not alone. It can be very isolating to have a living connection with that which is not seen, that which we know, and walk with that, despite maybe most people around us not. So we're going to work with isolation, martyrdom, grandiosity, many of the things that can come on the path that make it heavy rather than actually eventually a joy, a true coming home, and a deep, intimate walk with God for your life, right? One aspect of the path that is, the relationship to a spiritual teacher, a guide, um, and I titled the video "Dangerous but Strangely Necessary When Spiritual Teachers Sleep with Their Students." Um, because that's kind of one of somehow the most obvious transgressions of the vow. And I'm going to try to keep it really simple. I feel like this is a really difficult topic. And it's difficult because I experienced that, and I don't really want to bring that in here, but it has informed a whole lot of how I've moved forward with holding the school and caring for the wisdom stream that is mine to care for, right? Um, it's also an interesting thing because in a way, I'm a focalizer, right? My life has brought me to being a keeper of a flame, right? And so it's an interesting thing to speak to, but I do want to speak to it because I feel like there's a few pieces that would help to unburden that experience. And that experience, not just being specifically when a spiritual teacher sleeps with their students and the whole thing falls apart and everybody's crushed and fractured, which makes sense, but, you know, not just that, but all the misuses of spiritual power. Whenever you are called out of your own self-authority, whenever you are called out of your discernment, whenever you are pulled off of your path, or your personal power, your essential energy is siphoned into their unconscious or possibly conscious needs, right? That's the transgression that's happening there. So that's one of the things I want to say. Why it's so dangerous is because it fractures things. There's when we seek a teacher or we seek a guide, which they're really important on the path. It's a very holy, very beautiful relationship, right? And it's mutual. When that goes awry, then partly why it's so difficult is why we sought it out in the first place is because we're seeking greater coherency. We're seeking for guidance in terrain that we haven't walked yet. It's an inherently vulnerable place. So, and it's a place where we're remembering who we are, right? And we're remembering we're remembering. So, what I would say, just to sum up what it is to navigate through, can I trust this teacher? Or at what point do I or don't I? Or how do I evaluate what teachers, what guides, what I receive, right? Is to just kind of watch and ask in your experience of them in general, whether or not they're asking to sleep with you, in your experience of them, are they returning you to yourself? Can they hold whatever they hold, which is inevitably going to be charisma, right? I mean, these teachers and gurus, I mean, they're holding something. You're feeling it, you know. I've experienced it. Sitting in the presence of them, things change, things come alive, things are remembered. This is a gift, right? So the question is, though, when does that leave you more full or somehow um, tethered to them, right? You want to notice, are they guiding me all the way through? So it's inevitable that a teacher, they're holding something, and likely they've burned in order to hold it, right? Likely they've cultivated, they've suffered, and they've walked a long road in order to hold this thing, and even in order to be able to share it, right? So it's beautiful. It's really so very it's a role to be respected, not to be just, it's an important role. However, you want to make sure that, like, are when you leave their presence or in their words or whatever's happening, is it bringing you back to yourself in the end? Are they leading you through themselves to your direct connection with God, with creation? The message is pure. The message is coming from everywhere. Sometimes it's going to come through a human being. Sometimes it's going to come through a human vessel for you. And you're going to know it. You're going to recognize it. And you're going to want it. There's going to be, and there's going to be a beautiful, deep relationship there, a very special kind of relationship there. However, the place where I've seen it go most awry is just at that final moment. you know, I'll hold this, teach, guide, whatever, but can you see what's behind me? Are you feeling what's behind me, which is inside of you and which is with you at all times, right? That's what you want to feel for. And because that's how you prevent yourself getting far down the road with someone who's eventually going to sleep with everybody or misuse the money or do whatever they do that's going to shatter your whole world. It's a matter of growing out of spiritual naivety. And it makes sense that we have it because we haven't grown up in, this isn't a very acknowledged aspect of our lives, right? So we grow up and we become more savvy. We have more discernment. And where I would say that can start is always ask, is it just, if you know what I mean, is it going all the way through? Is it going through this person, this guide, this messenger, to where it came from? Can you see the through line? And if the messenger were to step back, is that through line intact and not pulled, right? So I understand that's vague, but I think you understand what I'm talking about. Because if that's not happening ongoingly, it will eventually end up in a skewed power dynamic that's going to collapse at some point. And it's going to leave you fractured and it's going to leave you confused. And however, there is the other aspect. So what I said in the video, it's dangerous but strangely necessary. So let's just talk about what that means. Obviously, it's not necessary that your teacher your guide goes completely out of integrity in order for anything to happen. It's not necessary in that way, but it does, as I've seen in my own life and also in many other, actually, wow, when I think about it, some of the teachers and the guides and the peers that I trust the most have all gone through this on some level. They've gone through the experience of deeply giving themselves to a path, a teacher, because that's the ask. Now, be careful. Sometimes, I don't know, I'm not going to speak to this, but for instance, in my case, we took hand, meaning we gave our hand to this path and this teacher in an agreement that they would guide us in the places that we couldn't see for ourselves. That's a very blindfolded place. I think there's a place for that actually. But then when if that person reveals that they're a narcissist or that they're not who they say they were, or somehow there's an incongruency there, that's a very difficult initiation to walk through. And as I'm thinking about it, quite a few of the people that I trust the most have gone through that. A real bowing down to something, and then the reclamation that's necessary once that something or someone falls from grace. So why I say it's strangely necessary is because it does appear that two things are true. One is that there does often come a point where anything that you've put between yourself and your own connection, between yourself and your soul, your knowing, is going to have to be, you're going to have to go through the initiation of losing that in order to have that connection be forged completely, right? It can be really brutal. It doesn't have to be, you know. This certainly isn't an inevitability with all teachers and all guides at all. You know, we are all the product of many teachers and many guides on the way who have been steadfast and who have paid attention to their own flaws and who have made sure that we have come home to ourselves, right? I would say that I bet you can think of some, right? I can think of many. However, that particular initiation where you have to burn through, and there, it's like so many of the initiations, the difficult ones that we go through in life, the only way to get it to really be fully kind of made by the transformation or by the initiation is to walk through it. So walking through what it is to have someone you've trusted on that deep of a level, and someone who's met you in the holy. I mean, it can be so confusing, and it on a really visceral level. And what I would say about that is just always remember, please always remember, please, 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 the message is pure. The message will find you. The message is eternal, right? The messenger may be flawed, and probably is. That's kind of part of the deal here. We're not the message, we get to sit by the message. We get to listen to it or articulate it or follow it to our greatest ability, but we're not the message. We're part of it. We're in our own becoming, right? So remember that no matter what happens, the message, what you touched, for instance, it can be really confusing if you touch incredible beauty, like the holy, in relationship or in study or discipleship with someone, and then they turn out to be untrustworthy or very different than what you thought. Please, I would beg you, would I beg you? I don't know. I would invite you to don't forsake the message. Don't forsake what was given to you, because that was given through the messenger, and it was always yours, right? Always yours and can't be taken. Now, your job is to really cultivate the strength and containment, self-authority, and personal integrity to hold that, live by it, and become a vessel for it, right? Likely it's part of your own initiation into a certain level of being a guide, right? So that's one thing I would say about it. The other two things I was thinking were that I think that it helps. There's almost like, especially if you're, a lot of us, I work with Deep Feminine Way, which for me is a way that is felt. And it's a way that a lot of women move through spirituality, where we're feeling our way. It doesn't come from the top down. It's not, this is my religion, this is my path, these are my practices, whatever. There's a call. It's a really beautiful, but also non-dogmatic, principled way of following the path. It's a literal lovership. It's a companionship. It's there's an intimacy there, right? And in that, part of the vulnerability is that we're dealing with a couple of amnesias, and part of what I want to work with in Pilgrim is just, there's some real important things for us to name so that we know what we're working with, right? Including some of the deficits that we've inherited culturally, and there are some deficits, right? We have a general amnesia about who we are. There is an entire overculture devoted to helping you forget who you actually are, what's actually true, what beauty really is, what holiness really is, what principled action really is, what self-authority really is. You know, there are anything that's commodifying anything else isn't looking towards the liberation of the human spirit. So we're dealing with that. What that means is when we come to teachers and other guides, or there's it's because we have some amnesia, and that there's a vulnerability there, and it's just good to know that. No, I'm going into this with a certain amount of amnesia. And I mean, why do I love my teachers so much? Because they consistently help to cure my recurrent amnesia. Why did I create our mystery school? It consistently is a cure for my own recurrent amnesia. It just is what it is. It's a path of remembrance. The sacred path is a path of remembrance. And what does that mean? Forgetting. Remembering, forgetting, remembering, right? Deepening, cultivating, all these things. So there's an amnesia, a general amnesia, a waking up, a coming home, a coming into what we really are, that we're working with, that's calling us to teachers, guides, the path in general. And also there's an amnesia, or at least I think just a lack of understanding of how do you approach or sit with a spiritual teacher or a spiritual guide or a guide of, what is that relationship? For many of us, all we know on some level, whether we're conscious of it or not, are transactional relationships, right? Or parental relationships. It just is what it is. And because it's not necessarily articulated, what is right relationship to your guide, your minister, your teacher, your whatever? What is the right relationship? Especially if it's coming from this deeply visceral knowing place. What is that? It's the right relationship is that, like I said before, in their presence, you sit in their presence, you sit in their light, you receive their articulations, and then you pay attention to what lights up in your own being. What words become your language? What words are your language already, right? What wisdom streams open up in you? What alignment is restored in you, right? I would imagine kind of across the board, whenever you sit in front of power, there's a way to sit with power, right? There's a way to sit with a presence or a person who's maybe more cultivated than you are in certain ways, for whatever reason. There's a way to do that doesn't create a transactional or imbalanced power dynamic, that does actually fully return you home to yourself, who and what you are in this moment, right? In your perfect becoming, but nourishes your becoming. So that's all I would say, is that just consider that. Maybe take a moment to develop or crystallize or consider your stance, your posture when you sit with a teacher, when you sit with a guide, when you sit with a religion, when you sit even with dogmas. Pay attention to what lights up in you and take that with you. Cultivate that. For instance, I could say like 20 things to you. And out of all those 20 things, one, if you went deep into, and you might be like, oh, wow, that maybe it sounds interesting to you, or it kind of resonates, or you, whatever it is, right? Maybe you loved all 20 things. Not necessary. Maybe you did. But if you went into your own being and you looked and you felt, I would bet that there's one, maybe two lights that are your own that maybe my words were able to polish, right? And though that's what you want to cultivate. It's an actual practice, right? There's an actual practice. There's a way to sit with spiritual teachers and guides and to yourself take responsibility that you aren't going there to relinquish any personal power. You aren't going there out of deficit. You might be going there out of amnesia. You might be going there in a vulnerable state. You might be going there because you've become dysregulated and incoherent and you need help. That's what we do for each other, right? Of course. But you're not going in a transactional format, and you're not going because of a deficit, right? It's different. You're not going because you don't have the thing. You're not sitting with this person or listening to this person because you don't have the thing. You're sitting with them because you've forgotten the thing. And maybe they're good for you. Maybe this is someone or a tradition or whatever that happens to, the languaging and everything just helps you remember again and again. Make sense? These are just some thoughts. Um, these are just some thoughts that I'm having as I'm actually on my own, potentially indefinite pilgrimage, and also as I'm preparing for Grace Walker. So I appreciate you spending some time with me around this for my experience of this that we're discussing, the misuse of spiritual power happened really young for me. I was young. I was like 21. So it has informed. I can see now, what 25 years later, I can see now how that experience actually set a foundation for me that I value deeply. I don't enter power transactions with either teachers or students. I don't. But it's because I feel what it feels like in my being, because I had to walk through that at that time. And it was really hard. It was one of the many hard, holy stretches of the holy road, right? But if that's something that you're working with or going through, I just want to tell you that it's an initiation like any other. And again, I feel like the most potent, trustworthy, integrous, coherent peers and teachers that I know have gone through something like this. And it has taught them from the inside out all about this. This is a very nuanced terrain, but it's taught them from the inside out about what this relationship between teacher and student really is, what the guide really is, and how to know, how to discern, right? Anyway, blessed be. Thanks for taking a minute with me. And if you want to join me for Grace Walker, you can. Grace Walker Pilgrim. It is on the 14th of this month, which is August of 2022. All of them are actually available now. They're just recorded. And I just yeah, I would love to close again with this. Well, we can close with a prayer. First of all, I just acknowledge again, I think it's really important and so beautiful that the message is never leaves you or me. And the amount of ways that it will find us if we know how to turn toward it are immeasurable, right? They're infinite. That's how loved we are, and that is part of the reality of Pilgrim. You are companioned by the one that you serve, and the one you serve is love, and the one you serve knows you deeply and never leaves you, right? So there's this fracture that can happen with a teacher or guru or all these things, and I know I just very healable and ultimately potentially could be an enormous blessing on your path into a pilgrim, a person who's walking a sacred path in which you are never alone, right? In which there's such an intimacy that's developed between you and the one that you serve, no matter what's in front of you, no matter where the message is coming from, that you have that deep sense of um, refuge, resource, intimacy. And there's a prayer I'll close with. I feel like it came from a Sufi something, but I don't know. I just found it in my notes, and it's part of the one of the prayers for this pilgrimage that I'm on. It's to remember that, Lord, in your house I am a pilgrim, a passing guest, like all my ancestors. Lord, in your house I am a pilgrim, a passing guest, like all my ancestors. Holy Mother, within your love I walk in beauty. I come from you, I return to you, walking with you always. Blessed be.